Hello. I would like to talk to you about why self-development is not a good idea. You probably have heard lots of time that self-development is really good, and in psychology we also talk about self-development is really good. There's lots of books and courses and workshops and a lot of things you can do to develop yourself. This video is gonna be about why you shouldn't do that, why you shouldn't spend time on that, but it's also going to be about what you can do instead. So to understand where I'm coming from when I'm saying this, we need to start at the beginning, So you have this biological body where you have your senses. You have your sense of sight and smelling and tasting and hearing and feeling and thinking. Your sense of thought is part of the senses as well. What is happening when you feel or you hear, you see or you touch something is that the body is picking up the sensation, and that information is then collected by the brain that is creating a meaning of it. In that, as someone believing itself to exist as you is created. Now, if you want to read more about that part, then obviously there's lots of books about physiology, biochemistry, and neurochemistry. And if you want to read more on the psychological side of it, then I can recommend you to read about Buddhism. It is the part that they talk about the 5 Skandas. That is what is happening when we have our senses that are navigating in the world, feeling, seeing, touching, sensing everything, and that information is collected by the brain and a meaning is created. And in that, as someone believing itself to exist as you is created. That means that the someone believing itself to exist, that is an illusion, because it's only a collection of the sense experiences. And just because you have a sensory experience, that does not mean that it's real. It just means that you have a sensory experience. So when the brain collects all that information about the senses around you, and this is a strawberry, this is a puppy, this is a bicycle, I have a fly in here. You know that because you have all the information that you have experienced throughout your life. It is stored in the brain, kind of like in a filing cabinet. And that means that next time you come across a strawberry, a puppy, or a fly, you can pick that information up from the filing cabinet and you know what it is. You have an experience about what that is. And in that, you also have attached a meaning to it. So if you like strawberries, when you see a strawberry, you have tasted a strawberry years ago, you see a strawberry and you think, I like strawberries. I'm going to like those strawberries. And then you buy some strawberries. Obviously, you don't know if you're going to like those strawberries. You know that you like the other strawberries, like the fly that is flying around in here. If I have had annoying experiences with flies in my past, in my filing cabinet, there's going to be, there's a fly in here. That's annoying. But I'm not sure actually if this fly is annoying. I only know that the past experiences with flies were annoying. And that is what is happening with the filing cabinet, that we kind of create a reality based on what we previously have experienced. And that's why we know what I like and what I do not like. The problem with that is obviously that you do not know if you like these strawberries and that fly. You only know what happened in the past. And obviously when we talk about strawberries and flies and puppies, it's fine. But the issue is that in that, you start to attach an identity. I am a person that likes strawberries. I am a person that do not like flies. And in that attachment of an identity, a lot of suffering is happening. Because alongside with the identifying, we also get a craving for more strawberries, and we get an aversion for less flies. Obviously, when I talk about strawberry and flies, it's a bit ridiculous. But if you think about it, there's nothing in your life that you haven't got an opinion about. You have an opinion about everything, even things that you have no experience with. You have an opinion about, and that is because of the filing cabinet that you pick up a similar situation and then you just project that into the situation that you're in now. So you're never ever really present. That's the first thing. The other thing is that in that filing cabinet and the someone believing itself to exist is created, we are split into two. Because we are in the physical being and in the biological being, we are in duality. So everything is an inhale and an exhale. It's night and day. It's spring and winter. Everything is in that duality. And it's the same with your personality. So the someone believing itself to exist, it has an experiencing part of it, which I usually call the ego. And the experiencing part of it, intrinsic in that, there's always a lot of comparing. So when you experience something, you always compare with a previous experience or with a thought future experience, which means that when you're in the ego and you're in the experience, you're rarely present. There's a lot of comparison going on all the time. And the ego is never ever satisfied. It always wants more. It always wants something different. And it is always looking for solutions outside of itself, which means that there's this intrinsic idea that I'm not okay, but I might be, I can become. The other part of that side of the personality, because it is dual, is what I call the authentic. It's also the observer. It's the one that in Buddhism, it's the one that is called Anatta. It's where you have no self. You have no personal opinion about things, but you're open to whatever is happening in the moment. Which means, for example, with the strawberries, let's say the ego and the authentic, they go out and they see a box of strawberries. The ego will go, I love strawberries. I want to buy strawberries. The authentic is going to go, let me see if I feel like strawberries right now. Might want to smell the strawberries to see what the senses pick up. Might want to look at them to see if it feels right. Might feeling what is happening. Do I feel like strawberries right now? Do I actually feel like eating strawberries right now? Maybe it's a yes or maybe it's a no. And if it's a no, there's no disappointment. If it's a yes, there's no looking forward to it. It just is in the moment when we're in it. So that you have access to all the time. You can always go from the ego into the authentic. The advantage with doing that is that from the authentic, there's a gap into the void. And I have made other videos where I talk about the void. And the void is where non-duality is happening. It's where everything is happening at the same time. There's no identifying. There's no right or wrong. There just is. But it's not what I want to talk about in this video. In this video, I want to talk about when you might already have seen it now. when the ego hear about self-development, it obviously immediately thinks, I want that. I want to be better than I am, because it's part of how the ego thinks. The ego is never content. The ego is never ever content. So the part of you that wants to self-develop, it is the ego part. But the problem is that you're never ever going to be satisfied. The ego is never ever going to be satisfied. And that means that you think that in order to be satisfied, no matter what you have done, how many courses you have taken, how many books you have read, how many hours you have meditated, how much you have green juiced yourself or Wim Hofed yourself into trying to be present and all of that, because the ego is constantly comparing. The ego is never ever content. And that's great for the self-development industry, because the ego part is never content. It's always going to believe that the next thing is is gonna get me there. And that is where the seeker is happening. And the seeker is never going to find. The job of the seeker is to seek. It's not to find. And the ego will never ever be satisfied. When you're in the authentic, you're not seeking, because you know that there's no point in seeking. What you have right now is contentment. You are content right now. What is right now is exactly like it's supposed to be. Nothing is missing. So there's no point in seeking. There's no point in developing the self and all that, because you're completely content right now. That said, when we talk about self-development, there's this illusion tied into it that there is a self to develop. There's not. As I started by saying, that you have all your sense perceptions, and that all that information is collected by the brain, and in that, as someone believing itself to exist is created. That is where the illusion of a self is happening. If you really look into it, you will see that there is no self, so there's no self to develop. So the reason why it's complete nonsense to spend time on self-development is that there is no self to develop. The reason why we want to do it is that the ego in the someone believing itself to exist wants to be better, wants to do better. And as I just said, the ego is always craving, always want more, where the authentic part of that duality, of the yin-yang part of our perception, knows that everything is just fine. So now you might ask, okay, I get that, there's no self, I understand that. How do I get away from the ego into the authentic? And that's the next thing. There's a lot of people ask me, how do I make the ego fall away? Or how do I avoid the ego? And the thing is, you can't. First of all, you can't avoid it. It will always be part of the illusion. And second of all, it can't fall away because there's no ego to fall away. The ego and the authentic is part of the illusion. So there's no ego to fall away. Then you might say, okay, I would like to be where I'm content with what is. How do I do that? And that one I can answer. It's not part of self-development because there's no self. It's not part of wanting the ego to disappear, fall away. You can't because it's an illusion. But what you can do is work with the barriers that you have between the ego and the authentic. So in the illusion of a self, or in the illusion of a someone believing itself to exist, you have the ego and the authentic. Both of them are an illusion. One of them is discontent with life, the other one is content with life. So your question might be, how can I get to a point where I'm no longer in the ego? And if you want to read more, I'm going to make lots of videos about this. The first one we're going to have is the workshop. I think it's the 7th of May, where we're going to talk about non-self. And this is it, because the non-self, or the identifying, is the first step for you to learn or to realize what reality actually is. So the first thing you need to become aware of is that how many different things in your life that you actually identify with, which is part of the illusion. And it's not something which you can meditate yourself out of, or reading books or anything. I can recommend you to listen to audios like this, or watching videos like this, or participating in workshops and stuff that works with this. But your focus needs to be on how much you actually identify with. In Buddhism, when we talk about those barriers or those hooks, that is kind of like holding you back in seeing what reality really is, that is called the 10 fetters. I'm going to put a link underneath, or write it underneath, so you can find it, and if you want to look more into it. But it's called the 10 fetters. I also think I'm going to make videos about that. Anyways, the first 5 of them is actually enough to to look into as it is, because it's very it's kind of like those that you go back and forth in the beginning, until you really understand that all the identifying that you do in the ego, all the craving and the striving that you have towards being in the authentic, in the observer, that it's just part of the same illusion. So the first step is about identifying. It's that you think that I am real. This is me. This is my body, my hair, my house, my computer, it's daylight, I'm a woman, all those things that we identify with. The first thing you need to understand is that is an illusion. There is no you. If you really look into, I've made other videos about it as well, but if you really, really look into it, like you might have skin, and then you got blood, and you got bone, and you got liquid, and you got cells, and you got space between the cells, and that's about it. There's no panilla in that anywhere. The idea of a panilla, or the idea of a me, is a complete illusion. It's because the brain is collecting all the information, and that gives a sense of somebody existing, a sense of somebody being here, but there's not really. The next step in understanding that, when you might get like, that's what I experienced, that I was getting like glimpses of that non-existing. The next thing that is happening then is doubt is kicking in, because then you're going to start to be doubtful about what you actually experience. So you might be standing having a discussion with somebody, and all of a sudden you feel, oh my goodness, this is completely pointless. There's no me, there's no you. I can connect with my heart right away just by touching you, because the sense of touch is changing the other sense organs. So if I'm really, really angry at you, if you take my hand and we hold hands, then all of a sudden I forget, but the mind kind of forgets that I was actually angry at you. So it's one of those things you can do to kind of snap out of it, if you can say it like that. And then you might have that experience that, oh my goodness, this is completely pointless. Why was I so angry at you? That makes no sense. And then you go into the doubt, going like, am I going crazy? Is this spiritual bypassing? Am I gaslighting myself? Shouldn't I be angry when you talk to me like that? And then you start to doubt what you're actually experiencing. That's great. It's really, really good, because it just tells you that you are now in a position where you're putting yourself in the observer role, and you can start to look at what is going on. And sometimes you have like a little, a straw into the experiencing and going like, is this right? Is this right? So the doubt, which is the next step of the barriers or the fetters, that one is it's doubt. The third one is the next one that you're gonna experience is that when you have experienced the non-identifying, and then you have experienced that you sometimes get clarity when you're standing, for example, in an argument, or if you all of a sudden realize, I don't want to do my work, I really don't like it anymore, I want to do something else. So you kind of like snap out of the identifying, that you're not that tied into the person that you were identifying with anymore. The next thing you're going to do then is that you're going to start to create a pattern around yourself that is going to help you not identify. So you will start to create rituals for yourself. And that is like meditating in the morning, eating the right things, doing all the right things, saying the right things, meeting with the right people, being a part of a sangha or a spiritual community, or having rituals around what you're doing in order to maintain what you have experienced. And those rituals are putting you straight back into the identifying. It's putting you straight back into the delusion that there is something that you can do. And that now we are back to what I started to talk about with the ego. The ego always believes that this is not okay, that is okay. So what I'm doing right now is wrong, but if I do it the right way, then it will be right. That is part of the rituals, part of the ego, that believes that whatever I do has a meaning. So if I do it the right way, it will be the right result. That's completely ego. Reality is that there is no right or wrong thing. You can't do anything right or wrong. I mean, I have met people that were super, super spiritual and have been, meditating for 40 plus years, but they were still completely tied into an identifying. So the non-identifying and the non-self is not going to happen just because you have the right rituals, because if you do it of the right reason, then you will have the wrong result because you're identifying. The next two are kind of like tied into one another, and it's craving and ill will. And craving is what you experience when something is going right. For example, if you have an experience of the identifying fall away and the self falling away, and you just experience just being, then you want more of that. And again, we're smacked back into the ego. It's because the ego expects completely unrealistic things in its life, that if you have had a great meditation, then you want an even better meditation next time, at least just as good a meditation next time. That is unrealistic, because if you open up to life, whatever is happening is exactly like it's supposed to be, because the proof is in that it is what is happening. So having a great meditation is just as good as having a bad meditation, and it's just as good or just as bad as not meditating, because it's not about that. But the craving is what we want when we want something or we wish for something. And we're smacked back into the ego again, because the ego always wants something else or wants something more than what it actually has. It's never, ever, ever content. And that is the same with the ill will. The ill will is that I do not want to be in the ego. Then you're smack bang in it. I don't want to be disturbed while I'm meditating. You're smack back into the ego that thinks that something can be right and other things can be wrong. In reality, there is no right or wrong. There just is. So I think I'm going to make individual videos about these barriers or these fetters or these hooks or whatever you want to call them. There are 10 in total, but start to work with the first 5 and you got enough on your plate as it is. So the bottom line of what I want to say is that it makes no sense to want to work with self-development, because there's no self to develop. That's the first thing. The second thing is that when you want to self-develop, you're in the ego. You think that you're not okay, but you can be okay. I am not, I should be. So you think that you can become better than who you already are. That is the other problem. The next problem with it is that you start to crave to be different or experiencing something that nice which you have already experienced, and you have a version to what you actually are which you really don't want. And all that is tied into a maintaining of the self, a maintaining of the identifying, and a maintaining of the ego, and the complete illusion of that the someone believing itself to exist actually is real. I'm not sure if I got everything in I wanted to say in this video. I hope that I'm leaving you with a sense of that what you're doing is right. Where you are in your life right now, it's completely fine. If you can focus on finding out where you identify, what you do in your life that makes you believe that you're actually real. For example, a lot of us get a clarity about that the self is an illusion in a fight, when we're fighting with somebody, when we're discussing with somebody, because it's a very potent way to become aware how much we're clinging to a personality. How dare you talk to me like that? So there's a lot of identifying when we're in a fight with somebody or when we're discussing with somebody. So if you have kind of like collected situation in your life at the moment where you seem to end up in discussions with like everyone, then congratulations. It's really, really good, because you're in a position where you can actually stop, take a breather, and look at the situation. What is it right now that makes you think that you exist? That you're actually here and you need to defend your opinion or need to defend your stance or whatever it is that you're trying to defend and maintain. Because in that, there's a huge illusion and delusion about someone is actually existing. Yeah. So what I would like for you to remember is that you're completely fine as you are. You don't need to do anything. There's nothing that you need to do, because you are already. There's nothing that should fall away. The ego shouldn't fall away, because the ego is just an illusion. You're completely fine the way that you are. Yeah. Thank you.